Hi, everyone. Oh, okay. Can you hear me okay? Thanks. Thank you all for coming to this session. I'll be talking about Safe Drinking Water Act and the technical assistance we have available. My name is Bayla Fisher. I'm part of the Tribal Drinking Water section. I work on the direct implementation of the Safe Drinking Water Act, working with tribes in Arizona. And also these slides will be available online on the Excel event page, and then we'll have a Q&A session afterwards. So for today's agenda, we'll be talking about PFAS and Region 9's PFAS Sampling Program and the proposed rule. We'll also talk about cross-connection control program, what are cross connections and how they can lead to a contamination event, and what you can do to mitigate. And finally, we'll talk about cybersecurity assessments at public water systems and the resources and tools EPA has to find cybersecurity gaps and protect your water system. Starting off with PFAS. PFAS are per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. They're a group of synthetic compounds, and PFAS is the umbrella term for these compounds. There are over 1,000 of PFAS compounds, and they're used in consumer and industrial products since the 1940s. The chemical characteristics of these compounds are that they're mobile in the environment. They're also very persistent in the environment. They bioaccumulate, and most importantly, they have adverse health effects. And the photo on the bottom right is a photo of a nonstick pan. PFAS is commonly used in nonstick pans to create the nonstick characteristic of the pan. PFAS, as I said, are very mobile in the environment, and they can get into the environment. One way they can get into the environment is from the waste from a manufacturer plant. It can be in the discharge water, and then that discharge water goes into um, uh, the water, and then once in the environment, it can get into the air and soil through the water cycle. Other examples that of PFAS use are in jet fuel and fire retardant, and both of those uses occur outside. Here's a slide of the EPA regulation timeline, and currently in March 2023, EPA released draft primary drinking water standards for 6 PFAS compounds. And later this year in 2023/early 2024, EPA will release the final rule, and water systems will have 3 years to be in compliance with the final rule. Here's a table of the proposed final rule with the maximum contaminant level goal and the maximum contaminant level, which water systems will have to be in compliance with. Many water systems have been participating in the Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule, UCMR 5. This program monitors unregulated contaminants in drinking water systems every 5 years, and this is the 5th iteration. They're currently looking into PFAS compounds and lithium. Over 10,000 water systems nationally will be participating, and in EPA Region 9, 41 tribal water systems are participating in UCMR 5. The data from this program will improve EPA's understanding of PFAS found nationally and at what levels. The exciting thing about our region, Region 9, is that we have a PFAS sampling program for all tribal public water systems. We're providing an opportunity to sample for 25 PFAS compounds. This program is free and voluntary. It's currently non-regulatory sampling. As I said, there is not a final rule right now, and we're sampling at the entry points and sources. And if you do find a PFAS detect through this program, we will do follow-up sampling for free. There's also free technical assistance provided of RCAC, and they'll be taking the samples. PFAS sampling program requirements. If a water system does detect PFAS over the health advisory levels, we do require that your water system notifies your consumers through a public notice. And if there are any detections, we require the water system to notify consumers in the CCR, in the Consumer Confidence Report. And if you don't do a CCR, you have to notify your consumers within a year. So why should you participate in EPA Region 9's PFAS Sampling Program? Most importantly, you want to protect your community, and understanding if there's PFAS in your water system, especially since there are adverse health effects, is a priority for you. The great thing is with this program, we do sample at the source and entry point. And also a great point is that this is free. PFAS sampling can cost hundreds of dollars. So we're saving you hundreds of dollars. We're providing this for free and also shipping all materials. And again, we have technical assistance provided. So someone will be taking these samples all for free. Another thing is to get ahead of regulation. Right now with draft regulation stated, you can use your PFAS data from our program to satisfy initial monitoring requirements. And again, when I talked about UCMR, 41 tribal public water systems are participating, but UCMR doesn't sample for source water. So if you wanted to understand if there is PFAS in your source water, this is a great program to participate in. Our current PFAS sampling results, we've had 93 water systems participate. Of those 93 water systems, 80 water systems have had no detection of PFAS. There have been 13 water systems with some level of PFAS, and of those 13, 4 water systems have had PFAS above the health advisory in the finished water. And here's a graph of the PFAS that's compounds that have been found in those 13 water systems. Now, PFAS seems really scary, especially since it's everywhere in the environment, but the good thing is that there are effective treatments to remove it. And a few examples are ion exchange resin, high pressure membrane, and powdered or granular activated carbon. Also, if you find PFAS in your water system, we do have funding available to address PFAS using those treatments I just talked about. In fiscal year of 24, we have $14 million available through our grant programs. We have 2 grant programs, the Drinking Water Tribal Set Aside, Emerging Contaminants, and Emerging Contaminants in Small or Disadvantaged Communities. And both of those grant programs, we're looking for projects supporting development infrastructure projects that address emerging contaminants in drinking water. And to learn more about the funding, we'll have a session today at 4:40 to 5:30 in this room, ballroom B/C. And here's a slide for information and resources about PFAS, and a reminder that these slides will be available online. So you can take a photo of it, or you can download the PDF version of these slides after. Oh, sorry, did you want another photo? Okay. Yeah? Can you please wait to the end if you don't mind? Thank you. Okay, the other program I wanted to talk about was Cross Connection Control Program. I'll be discussing what are cross connections and how they can lead to contamination of your drinking water. And more importantly, how can you protect your drinking water and mitigate these cross connections? Cross connections are actual or potential connections between a potable water supply and a non-potable water plumbing. And so this is an example of a kiddie pool being filled up with a garden hose. And as many people know, kiddie pool water is gross and really gross. And so you don't want that water in your drinking water. The water from the hose is drinking water, so this is an example of cross connection. If a backflow incident happens, you could get that gross kiddie pool water into your drinking water and potentially in your house plumbing, or even worse, the water system plumbing, and we don't want that. Cross connections, just because they're present doesn't mean that there's always a risk for contamination, but there is a possibility, so they're very important. And cross connection can happen 2 ways. The contamination incident can happen through backflow, and backflow can happen 2 ways: from back pressure, pressure of non-potable water, when pressure of non-potable water is greater than the pressure of potable water, and back siphonage, when there's negative pressure in potable water piping, causing non-potable water to be siphoned into the potable water line. And also potable water, that's water that's clean and safe for human consumption. So we don't want that kiddie pool water in our potable water. And here's examples of direct and indirect cross connection. So you can see the image on the left side of the screen would be similar to the kiddie pool, or the right side of the screen. And then the left side of the screen, you can see that the acid line and the water line meet at a T. So that's a direct connection. And if anything happens, if there's a backflow event, the acid can enter the water line and contaminate your water. And we don't want that. Here's a list of common high-risk cross-connections at public water systems. To list a few: livestock watering holes, hospitals, clinics, irrigation systems, manufacturing, pools, as I said, kiddie pools or bigger pools, and hotels/resorts. And here's a slide that shows an example of backflow via back siphonage. You can see that the contamination tank is hooked up to a hose at a hose bib at a house, and the house is connected to the water system. And down the stream of the water system, there is a main break, and so that changes the pressure of the water main, thus causing a backflow event. So that contaminated water in the tank would enter through the water system through your hose bib, and we don't want that. A bigger real life example is that in the southeast of the United States a few years ago, there was a cross connection incident where 40,000 consumer homes had fire retardant forced into their houses through water lines because they had this cross connection and there was nothing done about it. And so if they had a cross connection control program dealt with these cross connections, this could have been prevented and thousands of consumers wouldn't have had fire retardant into their house. Also a reminder, just because it is a hose and you may not use the water from the hose for drinking water purposes, it is drinking water. So we just want to remind you about that. And here are some examples of hoses that are a cross connection in a chemical tank, in a pesticide tank, and in a sink. Another point to make is that plumbers can accidentally create cross connection. It's important to review the plumbing that's done at the utility and throughout the whole water system. Plumbing codes should be adopted by tribal government to assure proper plumbing practices are adhered to. If you abide to the International Plumbing Code, cross connection control program standards are incorporated. At a minimum, the utility should be informed of any connections to the water system, but ideally they should have approving authority over any and all connections. One example of this is that it's common for a utility to not know about a housing development, and so the housing development, new houses could be connected to the water system without utility knowledge, and that's a problem because they could be connected to the water system improperly and thus lead to contamination. So you know about cross connections. What can you do about these cross connections? The utility can install backflow preventers on high-risk cross connections to prevent a potential backflow incident. There are two types of backflow preventers. There are devices that cannot be tested and assemblies that can be tested. And so the two on the top are assemblies. These are testable, and you would use these at higher risk connections, such as a hospital. And then the bottom right image is a hose bib backflow preventer, and so you can just attach that to your hose when you're filling up the kiddie pool, and no worries, the kiddie pool water will not enter your house, but it may enter the hose. And so then also we have a photo of an air gap. That's one of the best backflow preventers available. Here's an image of a bulk water station, and these are common in tribal public water systems. A truck will pull up and it'll fill through the piping on top. And so with this, there's always going to be a gap between where the blue pipe ends and where the truck starts. So no contamination risk possible from the truck into the water system. Another really common example of an air gap that you use in your daily lives would be a kitchen sink. No matter how much you fill your kitchen sink with like dirty water, that dirty water will not be entering your faucet because there's a gap between the sink and the faucet. So the great thing about cross-connection control programs are that they're easy and cheap to start. So it's really easy to be protecting your community from a backflow incident. And so to get started, please contact your EPA program manager, IHS, or RCAC for assistance. Cross-connection control program components. A program involves an ordinance, and the ordinance gives utility authority to implement the program. The utility may not have the necessary authority granted by tribal government/council to eliminate cross connections. An inventory is also required of the program to inventory potential hazards and existing protections, and also to eliminate these existing cross connections when applicable. The backflow preventers, the assemblies, as I showed in previous slide, that require annual testing are either required by required and can be done by the customer or the utility, and so it's necessary for the utility to have authority to access these preventers to test them. And also reviewing new connections to water systems. This program does take public education and outreach to let your consumers know of cross connections that they may create, i.e. the kiddie pool. And like any program, the work is ongoing, including the testing, implementation, and review. And finally, as tribal leadership, how can you ensure success of this program? And more importantly, protect your community from contamination incidents. You have the ability to give authority and direction to implement a cross-connection control program, require the elimination of cross connections, require these backflow preventers to be tested annually, and require backflow prevention for high-risk connections. This slide has cross-connection control program resources, and again, these slides will be available online. And you can always reach out to your EPA program manager for more information. Oh, here? Sorry, here? Oh, okay. Now, does this say cybersecurity? Does this one? Okay, here's resources. Sorry, everyone. This one? Okay, great. Sorry about that technical difficulty. And the final program I wanted to talk about is cybersecurity. Cybersecurity attacks against critical water infrastructure is increasing, and EPA wants to share their initiative and resources you can use to protect your utility and drinking water. In March of 2023, the EPA issued an interpretive rule requiring water systems to complete cybersecurity assessments on their operational technology. And later in October 2023, this memo was withdrawn. So although it's not required, we're still have these cybersecurity assessments available, and they're voluntary. These voluntary cybersecurity assessments, they're free and voluntary, and they're conducted by EPA virtually. You can also do it yourself as a water system, or you as your water system/utility can get the cybersecurity assessment done by a third party. These assessments will follow the sanitary survey schedule, and we'll reach out to water systems about this later this year or next year. And for these assessments, you may need to coordinate across tribal departments for IT information. And when you get your cybersecurity assessment done, you'll receive an assessment report and rule mitigation plan containing recommended risk mitigation actions specifically for your utility. Oh. is this the operational tech? Okay. During these assessments, we will be reviewing your operational technology, and operational technology is your software and hardware used to monitor and control specific devices and processes in water systems. And so here are a few. We have SCADA, Remote Telemetry Unit, RTU, and Programmable Logic Controller, PLC. And so all three of these are just examples of operational technology that's used um, to monitor and control the whole drinking water system. And all of these are vulnerable to cybersecurity attacks. In addition to the cybersecurity assessments that we have available, I also wanted to share some resources if you are in a cybersecurity incident or something happens. The most important thing that you should do if any incident happens is to contact the FBI. Report this incident to the FBI. You can also report it to Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, or you can report it to your EPA program manager. And all of us agencies will talk with each other and make sure that this report is reported to the FBI. And so you may think, wow, cybersecurity, this can't happen to me, but it can. Earlier this year, a tribe had their emails hacked and there was a ransomware, and it was a very costly experience. So I highly recommend either participating in the assessment or some training so you can find these cybersecurity gaps at your water system or tribe and protect yourself and protect your community. CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Agency that I mentioned in the last slide, they have lots of information and resources. This page shows if there is an incident, how you can report it. And I do recommend contacting them before paying any ransomware because they do have lots of experience with ransomware attacks. And so they should be able to help you and potentially be able to unlock your systems without paying ransomware. And here's a slide for cybersecurity resources. Again, these will be available online. Thank you all so much for coming to this presentation. Here are contact information for the three main topics that I discussed. Does anyone have any questions? Yes?
First of all, great presentation.
Thank you.
You did very well up there, and that was one of the better presentations I've sat in. So I have a few questions. First, with PFAS, on the treatment side, if you have to treat,
Yes.
what level of certification would my water operators need for treating for PFAS? Because if we're adding on treatment now, that means there might need more certifications for treatment. So what would that be?
That's a great question. Our operator certification requirement is based on disinfection and what source of water, groundwater or surface water. And so we want to need higher treatment, or sorry, we want to require higher operator certification.
Okay, great. And then my second question on PFAS, then, if we were to test on our systems, I have 3 water systems. One, I purchase all my water from a utility that we're connected to a municipality. So is the municipality required to also test for PFAS at this moment? I mean, I know it's Fed versus state. So what's the state of California doing for PFAS versus federal?
Yeah, that's a great question. Your municipality that you get water from may be participating in UCMR depending on the size. And so I would recommend reaching out to them first on asking what they're doing. And secondly, as a consecutive source who purchases water, you can still participate in this program. Obviously, you don't have a source water since you're getting it from the municipality, but we can test at your entry point to see if it's in your system.
Great, thank you. Yeah, because I have 3 systems,
Mm-hmm.
and one is 100%. We purchase all of our water. The other is both we got groundwater and we're purchasing from them. And the third system is 100% groundwater. So, and then my last question is on the cross connection control program. It's something we're interested in moving into at San Pasqual right now. We have a cross connection control plan that we've, adopted. So that was, I don't want to say it's the easy part, but it was the lowest barrier of entry in terms of cross connection, in terms of it was just staff time to write the plan. So my next question is, I think we're at the part where we want to implement some of our cross connection control plan, which means we need implementation dollars. Are there implementation dollars out there from EPA right now to purchase some of those cross connection devices that you showed on your slide?
I don't think we would be able to purchase these devices as they may fall under operation and management.
All right, thank you.
And you can always contact your EPA program manager for more information on your specific questions.
Okay. Yeah, because we want to put in cross connection control on each one of our homes, right? So that, is costly when we have 350 connections. And then we obviously will be testing those cross connections each year, which is a cost as well to send someone out there to do the testing. So yeah, just the thought of putting those on every home is like, that's like probably like, I think it's like $15,000, if not more, to implement that over time.
Yeah, and for your situation, maybe you could talk to other departments, like your housing department, and see if other departments want to come together for this plan. It's not just the water utility, it's the customer. So if you had like a gas station and you wanted a backflow preventer through this ordinance, you could have them install one and do the annual testing, and that could be a requirement of the utility.
Yeah, because I mean, your slide was good, and the mention, it was really funny with the kiddie pool and the hose. But us as a utility, our responsibility kind of ends once the water goes beyond the meter, right? So while we want to inform our customers and residents of potential cross connection beyond the meter towards their house, we're really more concerned about protecting our system from the meter to the main, right? So we want to drop cross connection devices, beyond our meter basically, and test those each year to make sure we don't have anything coming back. If a homeowner does something, we want to protect our system. So that's what we're looking at doing.
Thank you for the questions.
I just wanted to add, thanks, John, for that clarification, because I think potentially purchasing some of those devices could be eligible under the drinking water set aside program as kind of an infrastructure piece, the actual physical infrastructure. So that could be eligible. I think also I just wanted to mention that we've directed a lot of kind of directed TA for RCAC to help utilities do those inventories. So it sounds like you've done that already, but for some utilities that have not maybe identified all your high risk connections, that's something RCAC can support, and that's through an EPA contract to do the kind of the labor of the inventory. But thank you for the question.
Good morning. Check. John Prada, I'm with RCAC. Thank you. Yes, we can provide technical assistance. We are the technical assistance provider under contract with EPA. I'm not sure if I know you yet, met you in person.
Hi. I don't think we met either.
I have a few questions as well, and I wish I would have written them down. But Flores, anytime, you know me, hit me up. I can help you. Cross-connection control program plans. Let me go into that first, because you mentioned an ordinance will be required. And the thing is, with these ordinances we're helping them with, are they required by the tribe as a tribal ordinance, a water authority ordinance, or a water department type policy? Because this is going to be the way you're going to get a lot more cooperation in getting these completed. I can tell you this right now. PFAS, UCMR 5, you mentioned size, UCMRs aren't doing source water. Is that correct?
Correct.
So if a tribe had requested to do the sampling and then got shuffled off under UCMR, that means they're not going to get their source water. Couldn't they still be doing their source water with the pilot project?
Yes, you can sample your source water under our EPA Region 9's PFAS Sampling Program.
And will that be done in coordination or conjunction with the actual UCMR sampling, or will it be
It's separate
independent?
from UCMR, so it can be done at any time.
Okay, I'll have them reach out to you on that. There was one other thing, cybersecurity, voluntary. I'll hold back on that for now since it's just voluntary, but yeah. We would like to get more information on filling out those assessments from RCAC as well. So if you could provide some type of training maybe for everyone to be familiar with the template, the assessment form that you have, because as you mentioned, I assisted with I didn't assist, I participated at a sanitary survey recently, and that came up, and the question was, you need to coordinate that, like you said, with IT, with the tribe, with the other departments. There are so many departments. If that's going to be brought up and information to be shared, it's going to be a touchy subject down the road. Just my personal perspective. Again, I work for RCAC. I'm a circuit rider. I come out and provide technical assistance to disadvantaged communities, public water systems. John Prada, hit me up. Hit up your project manager anytime you need help.
Yes, I agree. The data is very sensitive, and we want to move through these assessments slowly to ensure that we're protecting this data, but also we want to assist tribal public water systems with finding cybersecurity gaps. Thank you.
Hi, Jean Benfall, working with the Rincon Tribe. I had a question about the PFAS sampling protocol. I looked on the website and I didn't see EPA had specifically a standard operating procedure for sampling, but it cited the state of Michigan, I believe. Is EPA planning on writing an SOP specifically for PFAS? I know most people know that it's a very finicky sampling, that you're not supposed to use certain products when you sample, not supposed to wear certain clothes. So it's just it can be challenging for sampling, especially UCMR5. And then I would be curious to know what kind of sampling protocol for this the EPA sampling for PFAS that you've been using.
Thank you for the question about sampling for PFAS. Right now, UCMR 5 is through headquarters, not the regional EPA. And so with sampling procedures, I know that they do send resources for the operator or whomever samples on how to, and things that they need to know, especially since PFAS is in a lot of things we use daily, and understanding what to avoid before you sample. And as I said in the presentation, RCAC conducts the sampling for PFAS, and they have resources and guidance and an SOP on things to follow. And so you're asking if EPA is going to come out like with a SOP? They should. We're hoping. Sorry that we have one for UCMR, so yes, John?
If you have Clean Water 106 programs and you're doing water quality monitoring, sampling, you're probably already familiar with some intense standard operating procedures and precautions that you're going to take. For the PFAS, is, oh my gosh, you feel like you're going through the HAZWOPER decon line, you know, to get prepared for this. You're washing your clothes days ahead of time. You're getting your equipment prepared. You know, there are a few things that we think about in storing the samples when we get them shipped to us, but it is seriously intense. And if you ever need help with that, we have a lot of information. Your project manager also has information on that. There is no specific written procedure detailed like we would have in our 106 programs for this yet. And that's something we will try to get thrown together. But again, anytime PFAS, It's everywhere. You know, it's on your Scotch guard, it's on your seat of your car, and something as I was going out and sampling. And when you do the sampling and you're going to get hits, who's going to get blamed is your sampler. So be sure that you're paying attention for them to take the precautions necessary. Photos, because they'll show everything. And like my biggest concern is your clothing. You gotta wear cotton clothing, something, you know, highly recommended, wool, one or the other. Washing your hands from site to site, changing your gloves every time you collect a batch of samples. We don't set the sample containers on the ground. We have to use a cotton material. So again, it's very intense and there's numerous precautions. It's the only thing we ask when we come out to help you with it is please know your system and know where we're going so we can coordinate the time frame to get the samples shipped off. That's the most important thing. You've got to meet a deadline to get them off in there for tomorrow. Any other questions, hit me up, hit up your project manager.
What are the adverse health effects of PFAS, and what are the levels that we should be watching out for if they go above a certain part per trillion or part per billion? What's the level we should expect that?
Great question. We actually have a PFAS expert in the house if Jason wants to take that answer. And we also, in this presentation, there was a health advisory table on PFAS. So you can download that.
So there's 6 PFAS compounds we're looking at regulating. We expect a final rule out early next year. The 2 common ones, PFAS and PFOA, are carcinogens. The rest are, you know, got a whole host of different environmental concerns. But so we have, like Bayla said, we have interim health advisories for 4 of the 6 compounds. But for PFAS and PFOA, it's well below where we're going to be regulating them because the current level is so far below where we can detect it. So we're setting an MCL at the level that most labs can monitor for, which is going to be 4 parts per trillion. And then the others will be set at their health advisory, which is closer to 10 parts per trillion.
Thank you for your question. There's a question back there in a purple shirt.
Morning. I got a couple questions. One is, I know their tribes are being doing this voluntarily for EPA, and when is that? Is there a limit on funding when that's going to discontinue?
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question?
So the funding EPA is currently paying for the testing on volunteer basis that tribes that are accepting to get their water systems tested. Is there a amount of funding that's going to be? What's the funding limit, or when is it getting cut off?
Thanks for asking about the funding. We do have $14 million available this FY24. And there's also going to be a funding assistance session later today at 4:40 to 5:30 in this ballroom for more information on your questions.
Okay, because I know that there are still some tribes that are not actively are not willing to volunteer at this time. And my second question was, what happens when a facility does test positive? If this is unregulated and unmonitored on your monitoring schedule at this time, and there's any funding for filtration or getting the stuff out of the system?
Yeah, that's a great question. There is funding available if you do find PFAS in your system now, even though it's not a regulated chemical.
And that funding is for, what's the funding cover?
So I wanted to get at a couple of your questions. Hi, Manuel. In terms of the sampling, I think we don't anticipate running out of funding for sampling, and we don't have a kind of deadline to sign up. We encourage you to do so as soon as possible. And that will get in the 14 million that Bayla mentioned. That's really for mitigation. That's for if you do find PFAS, identifying an alternate source, installing treatment, identifying a consolidation project. And we expect to get around 14 million each year through the bill year, so through FY26. So the incentive really is the sooner you test and find out if you have an issue, that gets you kind of first in line for that mitigation funding to identify alternate treatment or infrastructure that will address it. The other question you asked about, if you do find it, what do you have to do? I think that the more immediate steps, and this I want to be transparent about, is we do ask that utilities do consumer notices to their water consumers, and then we offer resampling. So those are kind of the immediate next steps, and then we'll work with you to identify kind of a mitigation plan depending on the levels and and what's available in terms of your water source. But like Bayla mentioned, we're going to talk a lot more about this at the 440 session, but I'm also happy to be a resource, my team here, if you want to follow up too. Thanks.
All right. Thank you.
Just want to add one more thing. So in addition to kind of finding out what's going on in your system, we're also using this funding to help support the initial monitoring that's going to be required under regulation. This sampling is, compared to other samples, are fairly expensive, and we can hope to cover a full year of monitoring that would be required under the rule. So get you guys a head start with compliance.
She mentioned, and I guess you'll know more, Jason, but if they do the initial baseline sampling the one time, does that put them in line for when it comes around under requirements under the reg, is when you start to enforce it and implement it? How's the waiver process going to go for this? Is it going to be similar to VOCs? Is it going to be quarterly sampling? Are they going to have to do this for 1, 2, 3 years? Or is this one-time shot with non-detects make them eligible for a waiver of once every 3 years, 2 years? How are the waivers going to work?
Yeah, so there's not going to be any waivers under this rule like you see with SOCs and VOCs, because it is kind of ubiquitous, and you can't kind of determine that a system is not at risk or a high risk of probability of finding it there. So no waivers. The actual monitoring frequency will depend on the levels that are found at each system. The exact details of that are still being worked out, so I don't even have the answer to that at this point. We'll certainly know, like I said, when the final rule comes out early next year. We'll have a very clear picture on what that looks like. But the initial monitoring for small groundwater systems is going to be 2 samples in that first year. So we're already offering the 1, and then we'll come back at a later date and do that second sample to get you a head start on that rule.
Any additional questions? Thank you everyone for attending this session. Please reach out if you have any questions. Have a good day.